Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's afternoon for everyone. Welcome back. This is day 2, afternoon of the For Love of Life, November 22 online bio-donation retreat. So housekeeping as per, this is a bio-donation retreat. If anybody's interested and wants to make a donation, our PayPal is info@freedomthinking.co.uk and same email address, info@freedomthinking.co.uk if you want our bank details, we can contact, or also if you want to have a conversation about potential work, if anybody wants to work with Jenny or myself, or both of us. Most of the time we just work like this together, don't we?
Yeah, not quite as much since Lucy has come, but
yeah, not quite as much since Lucy has come, but yeah, we tend to work together when we do our work. But yeah,
his dad calls us good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, that's right. Jen's good cop, I'm bad cop. I'm the one that usually does the awkward talking, conversation bit, and Jen does the sweet bit, and always comes out looking like smelling of roses. Yeah, so I'll put light on.
Hold on.
Yeah, and anybody who can't make a donation who feels they can't make a donation, then we ask them to pay it forward with an act of kindness. And please let us know what that is, so we know that. It's nice to hear that what we're doing has impact beyond this circle. And also we have a newsletter. If anybody's interested in our newsletter, our very sporadic newsletter, we've just been speaking and saying we need to get on top of our game when it comes to business. We're not the best business people on the planet.
Also, since Lucy has come along, she's been really interesting to both of us.
Yeah, she's been really interesting.
Should we just watch our baby and how cute she is?
Yeah, and I'm loving that bit as well. But we do put our newsletter. It's usually telling people about any events that are coming up. We don't hound people. We don't ping them out every few days or
probably
weeks.
Like to get about 3 or 4 a year.
Yeah, 3 or 4 a year most likely.
If we up our game, probably like every other month or something.
5 or something. So yeah, if you want to join our newsletter, that you can do that at at freedomthinking.co.uk. That's our website, freedomthinking.co.uk. On freedomthinking.co.uk, there's loads of free stuff. Like we do community groups every week and we put them up online. They're there for people just to use, to pass on to people who they think may benefit from it. Also,
the retreats that we've run before by donation, all the recordings are up. I think I've actually put it at the top of the page at the moment to make it a bit more obvious for people, so you can click on whichever month. I think there's 4 different ones up at the moment, and then these ones will be available from Monday night. I'll put them up on the website and send out a link.
Yeah, so these are available for anybody who's interested. Anybody, if you've got a friend or relative you think may be interested, and we think that they may benefit from this. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you stumbled across it, this is by donation, and if you're watching it in a few months' time, it's always exciting for Jen and us to receive a donation. Months down the line, it's like, oh wow, people are still looking, and thank you in advance. So anyway, that's housekeeping out of the way. Any more housekeeping?
No.
That's it, we cleaned house. So we're now going into questions, observations, and reflections. How are people doing? Has anybody got anything they want to talk about, expand on, share? This is the time for you lot.
Hi, me again. Hi, Jen and Dave.
Hi, me again.
I love what you're doing. I love this by donation. It's something that I question because I do the same sort of work. I work with mentoring and coaching people, and I've come across sites. I'm doing a new website for myself at the moment, and I come across sites of people that are doing the principles. And some of them are charging like £1,000, £2,000 for 6 sessions or something, and that's great. But I couldn't do that because I feel like it would only reach a certain amount of people. I'd feel like there would be if I was charging so much money for what I did, it would be out of reach for the people that I wanted to work with. Maybe there are people there that can afford it. And I love what you're doing on donation. It's like you must be in a lot of trust to be able to be there and do that in some way. Because yeah, I don't know what I'm asking or what I'm saying, but it was something that comes up for me in how to charge for this, because how can you charge for life? How can you charge for waking someone up to their own life? And yet, if we didn't do it, they wouldn't know, if that makes sense.
I always remember, because when I set about on my journey of this in 2013, I didn't charge any money. And the lady who introduced me, Sue Huginson, she's a wise lady. She's got her head screwed on. She said, "Why are you not charging people, Dave?" She said, "Have you not by now figured out this whole universe works on balance?
Mm-hmm.
If you're giving continuously, you're out of balance." She said, "Money is just an energetic exchange. All money is an energy that human beings use as an exchange for services and goods." She said, "Don't be afraid to charge." And I always remember another thing she said to me. She said, "Dave, for what you found, what would you give?" I said, "I would give everything. I'd give away everything to have what I have now." She said, "Good, let people pay some money." You know, what we have here is we have a thing which Jen and I have. We're not just saying we're the only people on the planet. You know, there's loads of amazing facilitators out there, beautiful facilitators. But we share something which we have seen, no matter what people's backgrounds, no matter what people come to us with, we have seen people change for the better, walk away free from their struggles. What would people pay for that? What would you give for that possibility? Most people would say, "I'd give pretty much everything I've got just to be happy, just to experience freedom and joy." You know, and one of the things that Sue did say to me, she said, "Dave, you know, when people come and work with me, Dave," she said, they're not paying for my service, really. They're paying for my time. So my time's valuable. You're charging for your time, Dave, because that was my question. How can I charge for something that's innate? She said, "No, you're not. You're charging for your time, Dave. And you're putting a value on your time." And that conversation helped me. You know, I wholeheartedly hold my hands up and say, I'm not a good businessman. Don't come to me looking for business advice. I was a very good tree surgeon. I'm not, without blowing my own trumpet, I was very good. I was meticulous and everything was done precisely. And I like to leave a really tidy job. I wasn't a good businessman. I like to think I'm okay at this job, but I'm not a good businessman. Do I have trust and faith? Sometimes, most of the time. Do I have wobbles? Yeah.
Also, if we've realised with our business, it's a balance. So we do, you know, we've got our in-person retreats we have to charge for. We try and keep them at a reasonable price. And we do our intensives and things like that we charge for. Because that sometimes working with people full on for 4 days, it's a lot of energy goes into it. But it's almost that feeling of always also wanting to always make it available.
Yeah.
Because it saved our lives. And I think that's the thing. I know that on our first Survive Donation event, or it might not have been the first, online, someone came who had tried to commit suicide a couple of weeks before. We didn't know that, but was still sort of quite lost. And it really, really helped them. And they would never have been able to pay at that time. So I think we've definitely tried to keep a balance with our business and respect the work that we've done. You know, I've spent a lot of money on trainings and traveling and learning about this stuff. But we always have a sliding scale. This is what we charge. If that's unmanageable for you, can we make it installments, or we can lower it? And I feel like it's about people getting really comfortable. There aren't any rules. And like Roger Mills was my first teacher. He was community-based psychologist, and he gave and at times got a bit burnt out. But he also, I felt like the reach of his work was so phenomenal, and what he kind of left as his legacy. So I've always been inspired by that aspect of it.
Yeah. But not everybody is in a position to do what we do.
No.
You know, I mean, it was apparently I don't really watch anything on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, but apparently there was some conversation put out about how you shouldn't be doing what we're doing, and there's a lot of opinions, you know. And in my opinion, I'm just grateful that there are people on this planet who are trying to help people, regardless of how they go about it. And I think people should be allowed to go about it however that individual sees fit. We had a client who came to us who had a massive shift, came and did an intensive, and then started charging £25,000 and got clients. And I asked her, I said, why would you do that when you paid us nothing anywhere near? Not that I wanted more money, but you paid us nothing, nowhere near that. And look at the impact it had on you. And why do you feel the need to charge somebody £25,000? To me, it made no sense. And I said, look, I'm open now. I'm really open, because perhaps I'm missing something. Perhaps there's something you could tell me. And she said, well, that's my worth. I said, fair enough. And if somebody thinks they're getting value at £25,000, who am I to say? Value is subjective. But I always say this, freedom thinking's a team. And it's not just me and Jen. It's our families. You know, my mother and my father support us in this work. We don't have a house. Jen and I don't have a home. You know, and my mum and dad put us up, and Jen's mum and dad look after us as well. They put us up, and we tend to do a lot of travel, so wouldn't really make sense for us to have a mortgage or a rent, because we travel too much. But freedom thinking is very much a team effort of our families as well.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so we're in a really almost like kind of, we're in a very, very privileged position in that respect. This is very much a team effort, and when people come and work with us, if they're in the Lake District, they'll come to my mum and dad's house where we'll be, and it's a beautiful place, you know, it's a fantastic place, and we go for walks and this, that and the other, and they get to meet my family, and more often than not, they come around and have tea with us, and they become part of the family, and we're lucky that we have that level of support. Yeah, if it was about making millions of pounds, this isn't the way to do it.
No, not at all. I mean, I'm happy with what I charge. It's always, I think I've charged pretty much the same for 20 years. Yeah. It's what you're comfortable with. It's fine. It's just, and actually that was really helpful, because that person that charged 25,000 has come to terms with something inside themselves, and that's what they feel they're worth, and that's what happens. Yeah,
and if that individual paying 25,000 feels that the service that they're getting is worth it, then, you know, this is all in the realms of subjectivity.
Yeah.
You know, what would you pay for mental health? What would you give?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are you actually charging for? You know, it's getting comfortable. The way this world works at this very present moment in time, money is the energy exchange for putting food on the table, for putting fuel in the car, for putting the lights on, for keeping your house maintained, for clothing us, fuel. You know, and when people say you shouldn't be charging for this, you're like, well, what, should I be out in the cold? You know, am I not entitled to put fuel in my car? You know, it can become, people can overthink it.
Yeah.
Until something better comes along, this is what we've got.
And how lucky are we to be able to do this? I
Totally.
had my plumber here yesterday sorting out something, and I was speaking to him, and he just said, I hate my job. He said, I hate it so much. He's done it all his life and he just hates it. And I'm looking at him thinking, okay, what do you really want to do? It's like, we are so privileged and so fortunate to be able to do something as beautiful as this.
We are.
Yeah, I love it. Anyway, thank you. That was useful.
No, it's ignore everybody else.
Yeah.
Fuck them. Excuse my language.
Other people said book them. I was thinking, what for?
Excuse my language and repeat it. Seriously.
Yeah.
A lot of people with opinions.
Yeah.
Those people who are coming with opinions are usually coming from a deep space of insecurity.
But also,
So just follow your own heart. That's the only thing I'd say, is follow your own heart and do what you think's right for you. And all that can change. You can change.
I just want to say that with Innate Wellbeing, my old company with Rudy, we used to do biodonation in person kind of weekends. And there's somebody who really, really disagreed with that and said we should not do it. And then in more recent times, some of the workshops that we've been doing biodonation, they said the reason that they supported it was because it was biodonation. So again, people change their minds and see things differently. And I know I can have a lot of thinking about money and asking for money, and I see that as my own story as well. So I think it really is such a, like, look inside, go within and see what makes sense. And it sounds like you feel comfortable with what you do, but then it's just like there's all this other stuff on Facebook. There's so many other people's opinions and ideas and how they do it and how they made their first million and how they got their dream house, and it's all of that kind of stuff. And I found it fascinating sometimes, you know, people coming to us and then I'd see that they'd started their own training company and what they charged, but then I'd know they'd still come to us and actually they were having to use credit cards. So it's almost like everything you see online is, again, it's what people want, how they want to come across, and we never know. And it is such an interesting thing. And I love how Sue spoke about it. It's just an energy exchange.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, we've done things before. It's been, can we do an exchange?
Yeah.
Can we exchange services? I love anything like that. And that's another thing we've offered people before. Okay, you can't pay financially. Is there an exchange we could do here?
Could you, if you're an electrician, could you come help us with my van kind of thing? And, you know, there's tons of different ways to skin a cat.
People are going to say that.
Did you?
Weird. Came into my head.
We think at each other's sandwiches.
You don't finish mine.
I don't finish yours, not yours.
Great.
No, that's it, love. There's just
There's no right or wrong way. You just got to work it out.
No.
For what's right for you. Yeah.
It's always very easy to compare yourself to others. You know, I can't get myself caught up every now and again. I'm like, should be doing better. But it's like, it's really easy to look at other people and think that they've got all this sorted out. But like Jen was saying, you know, people start their own training companies, start charging more than you. And then they come to you for the training. And it's like, and then they, and like Jen said, they're doing it on credit cards. You know, they'll put out the new flash car or whatever, and you don't know if they've got it on, if it's leased. You know, it might be a £70,000 car, but you don't know how they're paying for it or how long or anything like that. So I don't know. I think Facebook's not the best place to kind of try and gauge worth from or what you want to do from. I think this has really got to come from the heart. And that's why Jen and I do this, in spite of the odd bit of stick we get for it. It's because, no, it's what we want to do. So we'll stick with that. For now,
Right.
until something changes.
Thank you.
Christina, you've put this is a really helpful conversation. Thanks so much. Is that similar kind of thing you've been thinking, love?
Yeah, it's been kind of a thing for me lately about potentially sharing. Do I feel ready? And yeah, this whole thing of kind of charging for the spiritual, like something has just been sitting uncomfortably, but at the same time I need money. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's still something that's kind of sitting with me at the moment, that I don't know how I feel. And yeah, and I think there's a big thing about not comparing yourself with other people, because there is within the community like such a range. Like some people are charging, like what to me seems ridiculous, but obviously I think it is just like what sits right for you and not comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah. And who's your audience? Who's your target?
I don't know yet. That's the
This
thing.
is what you've got to figure out. I mean, if you're going to go into a big business, if you want to target corporate, if you go in, oh, you know, I'm going to do this for free, I'm going to do a donation, they're probably going to laugh you out the door. But if you go in with some ridiculous, look, this is how much I'm worth, this is worth 50 grand, you might stand more of a chance, ridiculously, you know. But that's not mine and Jen's target audience. Mine and Jen's target audience is everyone as equal. You know, so that's why there's people who come on our via donation courses who are absolutely minted, and we know they're minted, sat next to the people that we know who are going to struggle to pay the bills this month. You know, but that's where, for us, that's where it's at. But it depends on your target audience. Who do you want to work with?
That I'm still sitting with that.
There you go.
It's brewing. I mean, another thing for me that I'm sitting with at the moment is, what if people aren't impacted? That's where I feel like, what if I charge someone money? And I know that will happen. Like Sid didn't impact everyone, but somehow, like, why do I feel funny? Because they still have my time, but somehow that's sitting uncomfortably.
Something you're just gonna have to get used to.
Yeah.
You know, like I said yesterday, my heroes aren't the teachers. My heroes are those that hear. Personally, that's how I see it. Those that are prepared to question themselves. Is it true? You know, whatever. They're my heroes, but you can never guarantee. And one thing we do say to people is, look, we're 99.9% sure you're going to leave impacted, because in our experience, 99.9% people leave impacted. You know, most people walk away from say they come and do an intensive with us, they walk away going, that's been phenomenal, I can't believe it, and their lives have changed. But we do say to people, look, we are really confident, because we are confident in our work. We're very confident in our work, but we can't guarantee it. So we do make that really clear. Look, we cannot guarantee that you're going to leave with change, but we're really confident. We're very confident. So we just spell it out to people so they are aware before they come. And, you know, you get all sorts.
Remember Jack Pransky, I think he flew a load of people out to Salt Spring Island to work with Sid. I think there were psychologists and people working with mental health. And they all did not enjoy it at all and thought it was a load of rubbish. And it kind of took his work back. It took him a while then to build up again, people to actually listen. And you just think, wow, Sid had this like incredible experience. And to me, when I met him and when I listen and watch him, you just think, how could you not be impacted? And then a whole group of people thought load of rubbish. And I think that just makes me laugh. And I think Rudy and I did some work in the NHS once, and at the end of it, we went round to see what people had heard and, you know, how they were doing. And it had quite a lovely range of some people found it interesting. Some people were like, whoa, I'm going to look more into this. I think we only had 2 half-day sessions with them. And one guy just went, well, at the beginning I was mildly interested, and then I got slightly bored, and by the end I just thought you, and pointed to Rudy, were talking bollocks. And I just sat there like shrinking in my seat thinking, thank God you pointed at Rudy and not me. But I could feel like this just anxiety in my stomach, and we got in the car and Rudy was laughing his head off. It didn't bother him at all. And I don't know, it was a really good experience for me. And I know that in Elsie's book, she speaks about being a big conference, and Sid had asked her to be the warm-up act. And she was quite nervous, and then I don't know if you've heard the story, but she was on stage sharing. And someone stood up and was like, oh, I haven't come here to hear all about love. And then she said she like filled up with this horrible feeling. It was like, well, is this the feeling you want to live in? And sort of rushed off stage. And it really set her back and really made her feel quite uncomfortable. And it was a few years later, she bumped into that guy. And he said, what you said to me, is this the feeling you want to live in? Changed my life. And I think she shares that, I think, in my last book, the one before, and I can't bring the name to mind.
Nuggets of Wisdom?
Maybe. Yeah, I think it maybe was. But you can see how the perfection unfolds, and sometimes it's only in looking back, and something might feel deeply uncomfortable in the moment, but we can grow and learn from it. And that's the thing about this work. I had to really get over myself to start sharing, because however much it impacted me, speaking in front of groups of people was still not the most comfortable experience, and it still isn't sometimes. But I knew I wanted to share, and having to have conversations about money, again, something I found very uncomfortable. Even taking clothes back in shops, I'd feel uncomfortable about, even though, you know, it means nothing to the person behind the till. And I think it's a beautiful, this job and working like this, it keeps showing you your own ego and your own limitations, and that's helpful. And I think the discomfort is a really encouraging sign, because like there's something happening here, there's something coming up against my beliefs, and it's worth just allowing it to happen and trying things. Like I know that one of the by donation events we did, we got 2 people. This was an in-person one.
It was in Cumbria, wasn't it?
No, another one, like the first time I ever did it in Essex.
Oh, right. So
we got two people, and it felt like we'd hired a venue, didn't even cover the costs of that. But one of those people I know is still really involved in the community and volunteers at the Tikkun conference. And it went from 2 people over a period of 2 years to 50 people. So we had 50 people at a buy donation event. And we've kind of had where it's got up to gone from 2 people, and then we've had maybe like 30 people in an actual event. And it's just humbling. We don't know anything.
No.
But we get to play around and try things, and you can't get it wrong.
And I think, money aside, forgetting the money, there's every single person on this screen has got something to offer the next person. You know, I remember one time we were in Hermanus watching the whales.
Oh, yeah.
And this lady came up to me. She said, I've just got the most amazing photograph of you. I'm a journalist. She said, what do you think of that? And she showed me this picture, and there's this southern right whale breaching right out of the water, and I'm stood there at the back of my head just watching it. And she caught it. Beautiful picture. She said, do you mind if I put that in the newspaper? And I was like, no, certainly not, please. And I said, but would you send me an email or something? I said, I pulled out my business card. And she went, freedom thinking. She said, what's that? And so I told her. She said, I struggle with depression. And it was such a beautiful thing. Like, I can't even remember what the hell I said to her. I said, come over here, and we sat down on the rocks. I guess spoke to her about half an hour. Probably an hour. I lose sense of time. I haven't got a clue.
I had no idea where you were.
And the next day, this lady, we saw her in Hermanus for some. Did you meet up with us?
We met up with her.
We met up with her. And she said, whatever you said yesterday, she said, I'm just totally different today. You know, and it's like these little interactions you can have just at any time, just help guiding people. And, you know, there's no money, there's nothing to do with money at that moment. It was just me connecting with another person who needed some help. And I have something you might be interested in, you might not. And it's like, really, that's what this is all about. Really, that's what Jen and I, like I say, Jen and I haven't gone into this work to make millions of pounds out of it. We'd like to make enough so we can get by, certainly, maybe have some savings. But our motivation is more based in helping people. And so far, you know, things get tight, but so far we've always been looked after. There was a time when Jen and I first got together and we had £30 to our name. Now, when I say we had £30 to our name, I had a £3,000 overdraft. I was £2,970 into my overdraft. And that was all the money we had to our name. It's quite a fun time when I look back. But I remember Jen and I spoke about Lucy, my experience of meeting an angel yesterday morning. And I always ask Luce, in fact, Lucy is named after Lucy. But Jenny didn't like the name Lucy because she had a goat that used to bite her. Did not bite her. What was wrong with Lucy then?
She just used to remind me of the thing, but I like Lucy.
Oh.
It's just it reminds me of a goat. So I'm reminded of a goat every time I look at my daughter.
So we compromised and went on Lucia, which means light. But Lucy means light as well. And we went and sat down, and I prayed to Luce, and you just asked, and we just sat down holding hands, and we said, please send us some money, we'll work for it. We're really up against it now. And the next day, we just put out a video of a man named Nick who had come to our community group. He had struggled with agoraphobia, anxiety, depression for 20 years, medicated, wouldn't leave his house. And for some reason, he came to our community group after I had a bit of a meeting, and I saw him in the street. He was an old friend of mine. And in that two-hour session, he went home. And the next day, he sent me a text saying, guess where I am? I don't know, where are you? He said, I'm at the other end of town. It's totally changed. I'm free. And in that year, he got himself a job, and he's on our website. You can have a look at it if anybody's remotely interested. We interviewed him, got himself a job, got himself a promotion, lost 6 stone in weight, allowed Christmas for the first time. And we put this video out, and my mum and dad, bless them, we didn't ask them for any money, but mum and dad just rung up. Mum was crying. She said, I've just watched that video of Nick. She said, I can't believe what a difference you made to that man's life. She said, me and your dad are behind you. We support you. And she said, we want to give you £500 each. So the day after we asked for help, my mum and dad gave us, completely out of the blue, £1,000 between Jenny and I. And then the next day, your dad owed you 50 quid, didn't he? And he gave you back 250 quid. And then the next day, a lady contacted Jen about working with her daughter and a granddaughter who are at loggerheads. And Jen said, all right, well, I'll speak to them later on today. And she sat down and she got paid for these 2 one-to-ones. And that was all completely and utterly out of the blue. But then that night, this grandmother sent us a Facebook message saying, I can't believe what it's like having my granddaughter and my daughter sat cuddled up on the sofa together, laughing. She said, thank you. And I want to make a donation to Freedom Thinking. I want to give you £1,000. You know, it's like, this is a spiritual reality. We get lost in the physical, and the physical, everything's hard to move in the physical. It takes effort. And I'm not saying don't put effort into business. That's something Jenny and I need to learn. Certainly me. I am not a great businessman, but I do have total faith in goodness, even if it all appears to be going to shit. I'm not saying I'll always be given money like that. I've got total faith that everything is working out for the best. Maybe I've got lessons to learn. I don't know. But this is a spiritual reality. Spiritual first. Spiritual over. We mustn't forget that. And anything is possible within the spiritual. We mustn't forget that.
Well, that was interesting as well, because around that time, you said to me, what do you love doing? I said, well, the thing I loved about innate wellbeing was working with people over a year and seeing that change. I'd love to kind of mentor people who want to share this. I don't want to call it facilitator training, but I want to mentor people. Maybe just one person and just really put time into them. And then that was in the December. And then in the January, very early on, we got a message from someone in New Zealand saying, I came to your via donation event in New Zealand 6 years ago. And I always knew I'd work with you. I don't know how I want it to look, but could we work together? Like, I'd like to share this. So then we like designed a program around what she wanted. And
A year program.
A year program. And she's then become a brilliant friend. And then after 6 months, she said, you know what? I just feel like I don't even know if I want to share this anymore, but I feel so inspired by the job I'm already doing. And I've realized all this stuff that was getting in my way. And it was just so brilliant, because at the time in New Zealand, when we did the biodonation event and we only just covered the cost of the room, it seemed like disastrous. But then out of it, I've then got to work with this lady, and she's become an incredible friend, and she'll be a friend for life. And then now she shares, I think she had about 2 years staying in her actual job, and then she decided, I'm ready now, I want to share. And she shares just with people who are interested. She doesn't do it as a job. And I think that's the thing I love, like things that's that, I don't know if you'll tell it, the Chinese, not proverb, but the Chinese story. But something seems like a disaster, and then, oh, but then it's like this. And then it seems that it's going well, but then it's this. And you just see life's, you can't make sense of it.
Yeah, it'll always keep you on your toes. Yeah, that Chinese proverb is.
I don't know if it's a proverb or not. It's like a story, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what is a proverb?
Anyway.
I don't know.
Don't know. Don't ask me about English things. Yeah, a young Chinese man is training one of his stallions. And he leaves the gate open and one of them bolts. And some neighbours are walking past. They say, oh, I just saw what happened to your horse. Sorry,
Terrible.
this is terrible. Let's start again. A young lad's training one of his stallions, and he leaves the gate open. And this young lad goes off to find his horse. And as he's doing that, some neighbours walk past and say to his father, heard about your horse. That's terrible news. His father turned around and said, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. We'll see. Anyway, days go by, the son's come back, he can't find his horse. The neighbours walk past, say to the father, heard your horse hasn't come back. That's terrible news. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. We'll see. Anyway, a few days later, the stallion returns, and with it, it's brought some mares. The neighbours get wind of this. They come round, they say, the father, I hear your horse is back, and he's brought back some more. Yes, that's true. That's such wonderful news. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. We'll see. So the young son, he's breaking in some of these other horses that have come back. As he's breaking them in, he gets kicked and he breaks his leg. Neighbours come round, heard about your son. That's such terrible news. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. We'll see. Not long after that, a couple of days later, the Chinese are going to war, so they come round recruiting young men. They see this young lad can't walk, he's got a broken leg, so he doesn't get recruited. The neighbours come round, say to the father, I heard your son hasn't been recruited. That's such wonderful news. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll see. And I think that's just one of the most beautiful metaphors for life. You know, I did go to prison. At the time, it was the end of my life. I'll never do anything good with my life. I give myself a shite sentence for the rest of my life. I wouldn't remove it for a moment from my experience. I wouldn't erase it from my history. It was so valuable. You know, but at the time, it was so hard. It's hard for my family. We all grew an awful lot through it. I had to learn what it was like to have friends that didn't stand by you and stuff like that. And to this day, the odd one still judges me. They never got to know me again since. But it's like, even in our hardest times that we try and escape, there's value. In fact, our hardest times are usually when we're having our ego broken down. You know, we call it a breakdown. I'm having a breakdown. What is a breakdown? It's when reality that we expect to be happening collapses. It doesn't turn out like that. And we end up feeling all these feelings that we don't want to feel. Why? Because we're coming up against our own boundaries of belief. We're stood in the middle of the tunnel, trying to expand out, but getting squashed against the wall of our beliefs. It's only when eventually, at some point, we break out. We find ourselves free from that. It doesn't have to happen that way. Well, that's quite often what's happening when people are having a breakdown. Not every culture sees a breakdown as being a terrible thing. Some celebrate it as an awakening.
Just realised the time.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a
We've got,
13-minute break now.
well, yeah, we'll say 10-minute break and then we'll be back.
Yeah, because Linda Pettit will be on at 3:30 until 5. So there's time for questions. So yeah, go and have a drink, toilet break, and be back ready to start at 3:30.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your question. That was lovely by you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Do you want to?
Yeah, just we're welcoming Linda to share with us. Linda's been on a few of our retreats before, and it's always a treat. I always love just sitting back and listening. And yeah, I think you're one of the people that we saw quite early on when Dave and I got together. We saw you and Bill at the conference in the Northeast, and I think, you know, I'd had some judgment from the community, and what I was met with you and Bill was just love and interest in how I was doing and how life was, and I've always felt very grateful for that. And it was a fun conference as well, and I love to listen to you. I'm really excited to when I was looking to have spell your name on Facebook, I saw your book it's out. It's out there now. Is that right?
No, it's in final revision.
Review. It looked like a proper book, so I'm really looking forward to reading that, and I hope you'll talk to us a little bit more about it. And that's why I called your talk "Lean into Curves," and I love what you'd written on your website about why you called it that. Thank you for always being part of this and saying yes and getting up early. And
yeah, bless you. No, thank you, love. I think there's so many people that resonate with us because there's so many heartfelt people out there, but Linda's one of these people who we keep going, go on, Linda, one more. And I think one of the reasons why is Linda's not bound. We love open conversation. Linda will go there. She'll take it anywhere. She's not constricted herself or sees any limitation within the principles. She sees zero limitation within the principles, and she goes there, and we love that kind of conversation. We love it. She's had beautiful experiences in her own life that she draws upon, and yeah, it comes through in her teaching, and yeah, she's just great. We love her. So without further ado, the wonderful Linda Pettit is here with us. So Linda, we've got you down for an hour and a half. I mean, you don't have to fill that, but we've got you for an hour and a half. If you want to leave time for some questions and reflections and stuff like that, then we're going to leave this up to you. You're a professional, you know what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here again. I truly feel honored and kind of humbled. You have so many possible guests out there, and for me to be asked back 3 times, it's like, well, you know, it's hard to even step into that space in a way. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here. I'd love for this to be a conversation. So my plan is kind of to talk for 45 minutes and then leave an open space. I'm perfectly available for the next hour and a half to just take questions and talk with you. I'm much more of a facilitator than I am a teacher. I just like that role better. So, and the book is a memoir of my life, and it is called Leaning into Curves. The subtitle keeps getting twisted around and tinkered with a little, so I'm not sure where that'll land, but currently it's a therapist's wild ride to rediscover love and wisdom, but we're looking at ways to shorten that. So I don't know where that'll land, but I thought I would talk about the 5 primary themes that guide the book and really sort of capture the primary areas of insight that I've had in my life, and that really quantum leapt forward when I came across the principles. And for those of you who don't know my story, in case you don't, I encountered the principles when I met Bill Pettit on Valentine's Day in 2023. And I was at the university, West Virginia University, giving a talk on the power.
Linda,
Yeah.
Linda,
1993.
you met him next year.
Oh, did I say 2023?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
She can time travel as well.
Oh, I'm really intuitive. I talk to you about something that's going to happen next year. That's funny. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I met him in 2003. And I met him when I was doing a grand rounds, a talk for the medical center at West Virginia University on the power of unconditional love in healing. And he was on his way to lunch and saw the poster outside the big amphitheater where I was presenting. And he tells me that for about 30 seconds, he stood there and went, lunch, unconditional love, lunch, unconditional love. And unconditional love won out, but not by much. So he came in and introduced himself at the end of the talk. And 7 months later, we were married. And after that, I met Sydney Banks, spent time with Sydney Banks on Salt Spring Island, and he would call our house just about every other weekend, I would say, maybe even more. And he did that because he was mentoring Bill, and I was kind of along for the ride. And we would lay on the bed and put the phone on speaker and just listen to him talk. And gradually, it was not a quick sell for me, but gradually in about 2 years, I started to see the wisdom that he was pointing to more deeply, and made a decision that I was going to spend the rest of my life sharing the understanding, which I have done to this point. So the five sort of insights I want to talk about are my journey to go from worry to wonder, my journey to go from pushing to presence, my journey to go from valuing the intellect to valuing my intuition more, my journey to move from judgment to love and forgiveness, and my journey to move from being a very religious person to being a very spiritual person. So the leaning into curves metaphor came because my late husband, Jim, loved motorcycle riding. And he was a missionary in the Philippines for 20 years before I met him. And his work required that he go back into the jungles and across mountains and muddy trails. And he discovered that the easiest way to do that, to get to the barrios where he served as a priest, was to use bikes, small motorcycles. And he fell in love with them. So when he came back to the States, he bought a motorcycle, and that was really his primary and preferred mode of transportation for the rest of his life. So when I met him, our first date was on the back of a motorcycle, and I had never been on a bike before. I was pretty scared. It seemed pretty risky to me. And we took our first ride, and afterwards he really gently said to me, I'd really love to keep riding with you, Linda. I need a little drink of tea here. But it'll really help if you learn something about leaning into curves. So I like curvy roads, and it's a wild ride. And when you're riding with me, when we come into curves, you do what just about everybody does when they first ride a motorcycle. You lean out of the curve. You're trying to counterbalance. You're trying to stay in control. And unfortunately, that makes my job as the driver really difficult, because safe and wild riding of curves asks that you lean into the curve. You go with me. You follow with me. You go with the bike. You don't resist. And what you'll discover is that when you do that, you actually feel more in control, but the ride is more fun, and the ride is easier, and it just gets very natural once you overcome that sort of your brain's tendency to want to push you in the other direction. And it will be safer. It will be much, much safer if you learn to do this. So the next couple of rides, I had to practice that. And it was a little scary, because sometimes Jim loved curves. And sometimes he would take curves so deeply that the pedal, the inside pedal, we would scrape it on the asphalt. And it was really a little bit, but I saw what he meant, that when we went into the curves and I leaned with him, it was exhilarating, it was thrilling, and it was smoother, it felt safer. And in a very short period of time, I just started to do that very naturally. I'd kind of hang on to him and just lean in with his body. And I became an expert rider with him, and we rode over 200,000 miles together on our motorcycle, all around the North American continent, all around the upper reaches of Canada, all around the United States. I felt very privileged to have that experience with him. He died in 1999 in an automobile accident, oddly enough, but he rode until the very end of his life, as often as he could. So as I thought about that as a metaphor for life, it just worked. It just felt right. That one of the things that I learned, both from riding and then from meeting Sydney Banks and coming to have some degree of understanding of the principles, was that it really helped me to move myself, and then it became less effortful and more natural, from worrying to wonder. I was a chronically anxious person. I worried a lot. I lived in a state of perpetual worry, and not infrequently, that anxiety would spill over into panic. So had I been diagnosed, probably as a young child, I would have met the diagnostic criteria for both panic disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. I just didn't really know very much about that. And I just knew that I was a worrier who always bit her nails to the quick and lived in a constant state of fear. And it occurred to me when I started to listen to Sid that he would always say, he talked about thought, but more he focused when he talked to us on finding and living from a beautiful feeling. And that made sense to me because I'm a very feeling oriented person. I have deep feelings. I am aware of my feelings, love my feelings. My feelings sometimes take me on a wild ride. But I also had seen that there was a beautiful feeling at the heart of life. I think I knew that from the time I was a small child. And in my book, the first chapter, which is called First Memory, I talk about how even at 3 years old, my memory focused, what my inner observer that started recording that day, or at least consciously recording that day, focused on beauty, focused on love, was aware of a beautiful feeling, even in the middle of a very simple sort of experience that I was having of watching my mother bathe my brand new sister. And so I thought, I don't know about this thought thing. I've had some trouble sort of sorting out what that means, especially as a psychologist, because at that point I'd been a psychologist and doing therapy for over 20 years. But the idea of living in a beautiful feeling or from a beautiful feeling just made a lot of sense to me. So I started to experiment with just shifting from worry to wonder, because it occurred to me that things always turned out some way. You know, by hindsight, the things I worried about always turned out some way. And most of the time I couldn't have predicted how they were going to turn out. So exactly, maybe I had a little bit of a clue, but it just started to make sense. Yeah, why worry about it? Why not wonder about it? And so I started to just, in a way, practice that. Thanks to my introduction to the principles, I would start to, when I caught myself worrying, I would say, can I move to the feeling of wonder? And curiously, I started to see right away that lessened my anxiety tremendously, and also seemed to put me in a state where intuition flowed more freely. Or maybe what I should say is that I was more aware of the intuition that was flowing freely behind life. And so I started to get answers to things more quickly. And I liked that. And they were answers to really practical things like, where did I leave my keys? To how do I get help with fixing this thing that's going on in my house? To bigger things like, how do I respond to my teenage daughter who's making the transition to womanhood and is about to go away to college and is struggling? Or how do I deal with this health worry that's come up? So wonder became a linchpin of my life. And I live a lot now in wonder. And I still have to remind myself, the other day, Bill and I were going through a really silly little thing. We were trying to fire the alarm services provider of our home in Phoenix and bring on a new one because the other one was clearly dropping the ball and we'd started to have trouble. And the level of belligerence and bullying we encountered from the alarm service that we were leaving was incredulous to both of us. And we really could not figure out for a while how we were going to get a resolution of that switch that was gentle and made sense. And I was really starting to worry it and get resentful and upset about it. And I reminded myself, you know, Linda, it's going to work out some way. It's going to work out some way. Much better to stay and wonder. And so I went back to wondering how it was all going to work out. And I loved the feeling. It's just gentler. It's easier. I knew it was better for my physiology to be in that place. And sure enough, you know, it worked out. We figured it out. The answer became clear in a little bit of time. And I was really grateful that I saved myself the physiologic and psychological stress of worry, because that's not good for me and it's not good for any of us. You know, worry, anxiety creates, enhances and activates and enhances the inflammatory response in the body. And the inflammatory response has been tied to every single physical and mental disorder there is. It's a key activation in all of the physical and mental distress that we experience, ranging from ringing in the ears to how much our big toe throbs when we stub it. So anything we can do to step away from the inflammatory response is a good thing. And moving from worry to wonder was a big part of that. The other thing that leaning into curves taught me was moving from pushing to presence. I would say that in addition to worry, trying to push life has been my number one downfall, my number one, bugaboo thing that I just have to constantly be mindful of. I just have been in my life a pretty driven person. And in a way, that's not all bad. I have accomplished a tremendous amount because I have a solid work ethic and a lot of stamina, and I love working, love all kinds of work. But I have also suffered tremendously from overdoing that. I pushed myself so much trying to get a new house that my first husband and I were built, that I ended up falling off a ladder and destroying my right knee and the L5-S1 disc in my back. And that has given me a lifelong experience of chronic pain to manage and live through, which I do really well. But it came as a direct result of pushing too hard. And when I met Sid, it's so funny, I started to see that I didn't have to do that there really was a guidance system behind life. Again, it was pointing me toward intuition, that I was being guided through everything. And that if I could learn to surrender and trust that I got done everything that needed to get done. And I did it with a lot more gentleness and a lot more quiet energy and a lot more efficiency, because I was flowing with life rather than trying to push the envelope. And what that took from me was presence, was just showing up in the moment and getting a little quieter in my head and being aware that my mind was chattering and that the intellect was telling me, you got to do this, you got to do that, get this done next. But underneath there was this quiet, this silence, this trustworthy space, a space of love where intuition could flow in and it would point me in a direction. And that direction was trustworthy. It wasn't always the direction that I expected, but it was really trustworthy. So my life started to slow down. And I remember I was talking to a friend, Joe Boyle, who was a 3 Principles teacher. one day. He and his wife Doris were at our house at the time we were living in West Virginia. And I said to Joe, I think I'm getting a little depressed. And Joe said, well, why do you think that, Linda? And I said, because I'm just slowing down and I'm not getting as much done. And I feel like I'm just moving kind of in a more slow motion way. I think I've become depressed. And Joe just started laughing. And he said, Linda, I think maybe you're recovering from depression. I think you've been pushing yourself to stay above a kind of depression, a kind of agitated depression, where you're always pushing. And that was such an insight. It was such a twist. And I thought about that and I thought, that's right. I've been pushing myself to stay above this fear that if I stopped, there would just be emptiness underneath that. But in fact, there's not emptiness. There's slowness. There's silence. There's quietness. There's much more rest. And it just feels weird. It just feels different from the way that I've learned to do life. And it feels better. It just feels better. I joke, but it wasn't a joke, that when Bill in his wisdom started to point me toward listening to Sid, because Bill could sense that I was really sped up and he wanted to help me, he would say to me, watch Sid's tapes and videos. But every time I turn on one of Sid's tapes, and I think I might have mentioned this in one of my talks for this retreat before, I would fall asleep. As soon as Sid would start talking, I would fall asleep. And I would think to myself, oh, he's so slow, and it's that Scottish brogue and that quiet way of talking, and he's so monotone. It's him. That's why I'm falling asleep. And it would happen so frequently that I wouldn't give Bill the satisfaction of thinking that I was even listening to Sid. So I wouldn't tell him. I would wait till Bill left the house, and then I would put the tape on, and it would happen again. I would fall asleep. It took me a while, but I realized that I was really tired. I was really tired from pushing myself so hard. And that Sid was touching, in his words were touching the space inside of me that is quiet, the space of love. And in that space, I was doing what I needed most. I needed rest. I would fall asleep. And as I began to give myself much more rest, I saw that I was more efficient. I saw that I was doing everything that needed to get done. I saw I was actually doing more than what I thought needed to get done, but I was doing it from a place of rested well-being, and that was really beautiful. Doing it from a place of presence with far less wear and tear on the physiology of my body. So that was really helpful. That was really beautiful. And of course, that was connected to the next transformation for me, which was moving from trusting my intellect to trusting intuition. I see that wisdom is flowing, spiritual wisdom is flowing toward all of us by a thought, and it never stops. We are it. We are that wisdom in motion. And that when we're quiet, that wisdom takes form in a knowing in our bodies, which I call intuition. So it's a sensory kind of knowing. I feel it. We sometimes call intuition gut hunches or inner knowing, or a sense of something. I actually experience it sometimes as a physical feeling of magnetic pull toward a certain thing, or an attraction towards certain things, or a vibrational sense of being moved in a certain direction. And it's there all the time. And I've been aware of it since I was a little kid. But it seemed on again, off again. And once I found the principles, I began to see that the only thing that ever took me away from it was my personal use of the gift of thinking, and usually use of that gift in negative directions, meaning that I had taken myself to a place where I felt bad, I felt worried, I felt upset, I felt resentful, I felt angry, I felt pressured, whatever. And in that state, it wasn't that intuition didn't come through, because it's pretty powerful. And sometimes it will override that state and come through. But it became really clear to me that I could sense it much more when I was letting my intellect do its thing, but not paying attention to the ticker tape, and listening first inwardly to that deeper space of love, where intuitively I would see what to do, and then put my intellect in service to getting it done. Now, one of the things that I see about intuition is that it points the way, but it doesn't explain why. It points the way, but it doesn't explain why. So a lot of times when I'm listening intuitively, I'll get a sense that the next right thing is to do X, Y, or Z, but sometimes it doesn't make sense on an intellectual level. Think, really? But I've learned that that's just the way intuition is, and that if I can trust it and lean into it, it always turns out well, but not necessarily in the way that I expect. That was a lot like leaning into the motorcycle on curves, that it didn't necessarily make intellectual sense, but it definitely contributed to a right-sized ride, a ride that felt really fun and safe. I could give you hundreds of examples of times in my life when I've had an intuitive knowing and it didn't make sense. One that comes to mind is when my daughter was 2, she went through, as most 2-year-olds do, a really oppositional phase. She didn't want to put clothes on. And getting clothes on her became a battle every day. And she went through a phase where she would only wear one dress. It was a little blue dress with yellow and red flowers on it. And so I had to wash that dress every night, because it was the only dress she would wear in the morning. And this had gone on for a month. So I decided there must be something wrong. And I went to see a colleague of mine who was a psychologist, a very wise man who had raised 4 kids. But I consulted him, I paid him for a session, and I went in and I said, I'm really worried that there's something wrong with my daughter. She won't let me dress her, and she will only wear this one particular dress. And he said, well, you know, it's possible that there is some problem with sensory integration. So I think we should check that out, because it is a little bit unusual that a kid doesn't want to have clothes on her body. Maybe she's very sensitive to sensory cues. So he sent me for a test, a set of tests with her that tested her management of sensory information with an occupational therapist. Well, what came back from the test was that there was no sensory integration problem, and that actually my daughter was probably gifted, that she just had very heightened awareness to cues, to language, to expression. And so the therapist, my friend Bob, said to me, Linda, I have a feeling that this is more about you, and it's more about over-directed parenting, that your daughter is trying to stretch away from you, and it's time for you to stretch back to yourself. That she doesn't need the level of parenting that she's needed to this point. And you can kind of let up a little bit and let her be her own person. And I think the more you do that, the more this little problem with dressing is going to go away. Well, my intellect went into a total rebellion about that. That can't be right. But I went home, I trusted Bob, and I went home and I thought, okay, so what's next for me? What's next for me as a woman? And the answer that I got was, it's time for you to go to doctoral school. And I thought, I can't do that. A, I'm not smart enough to get a doctorate. B, I have no money in savings to pay for a doctorate. C, that would probably involve moving my family, my daughter and my husband. And would he even be up for that? How would I ever get that done? But it felt right. And I talked to my husband, and we just decided to start putting one step ahead of the other. And the first step was that I had to take the graduate record exam. And the next step was that I had to apply. And bottom line, 8 years later, I graduated from doctoral school and became a licensed psychologist. And we were guided through it intuitively in so many ways. Money showed up when we needed it. Mentors showed up when we needed them. We found our way to West Virginia, which we had wanted to move to. And the way showed up through doctoral school and all the monetary support I got to go through doctoral school. It was phenomenal. And I didn't understand that. I couldn't have explained what I saw happening until I found the language of the principles. That there really, really, really was a spiritual intelligence behind life that was guiding us and making our dreams become real. And the only role of the intellect was to serve that intellectual knowing, that intuitive knowing. I could talk about that till the cows come home, because that's one of my favorite things to talk about. But I wanted to talk about two other things. One was that I saw that I needed to learn something about moving from judgment to love and forgiveness. That one of the biggest blocks to the free flow of the spiritual intelligence behind life for me, but I suspect this is kind of universal, was that I was in judgment too much. And that it would be really helpful to learn more about staying more in a beautiful feeling of love and in a beautiful feeling of forgiveness. And the first thing I had to do was forgive people. Of course, I had some difficult experiences as a child, painful experiences, and I had to forgive the people that were involved. And the principles showed me how to do that. They showed me how to just simply let thoughts go and trust that underneath the thoughts there was this beautiful loving state I would go to, this beautiful loving compassion that would show me the steps I needed to get to full forgiveness. And they came in very quick order. But the bigger thing for me was forgiving life. Life, like Sid Banks said, and so many other spiritual teachers have said similar things, life is a contact sport. We all get bumped around. And I had some pretty significant bumps. And I would say the biggest bump was the sudden death of my first husband. Just came out of the blue. And upended my life in so many ways. And there were messages and lessons related to forgiving him and forgiving some of the struggles we'd had, and even forgiving him for taking a curve and running into a guardrail and ending his life. I remember just being so angry with him for a short while. How could you do that? How could you leave me? How could you leave me, the one behind, to manage life and to parent a child who's now in terrible grief? But forgiving him was pretty easy. You know, I was pretty sure he didn't really have it in his own plan that he was going to die when he did. But forgiving life for that was a lot harder. Just being able to see that life is, and boy, what a lesson in leaning into curves, not resisting, just taking life as it is. And it got a lot easier for me when I really remembered how much I love life. I really love being alive. I love seeing beauty. I love being a sensory being. And with that comes unexpected hardships and trials. And not resisting those, forgiving life for being what it is, and just flowing with them has really enhanced the quality of my life. And I know it enhances the quality of the lives of the people I work with. And finally, for me, the journey of moving from judgment to love and forgiveness, moving from worry to wonder, moving from pushing to presence, from trusting my intellect to trusting intuition, really rested on moving from being a religious person to a spiritual person. I was raised Catholic, and I was a very religious Catholic. I followed all the rituals of my religion. And I'm not saying that that's bad. Please don't hear that. It isn't. In some ways, it was really very beautiful. I do very little of that anymore. But I really saw that a lot of the rituals I was handed were mindless rituals. They really weren't rooted in any deep feeling. And they caused me to kind of move in the direction of believing that there was a spiritual side of life and a human side of life, and that the two were not necessarily very connected. When I thought of spiritual experiences, maybe even as much as 5 years ago, I would tend to think of things like moments when I was sitting on a beach and watching a sunrise, or moments when I was breastfeeding my daughter and feeling the flow of milk through my body and totally absorbed in the miracle of having a child and feeding her. I would think of kind of high moments of awe and beauty, moments that were transcendent in a religious sense or a spiritual sense. But somewhere along the way, about 5 years ago, something Sydney Banks wrote in The Enlightened Gardener Revisited really hit me. And he said, life is one divine cell. Love is one divine cell. And if you divided that cell in half, you would divide it into the formed and the formless. You would divide it into nature and the formless. But they're all part of one divine cell. And it just hit me so hard that everything in life is spiritual. Everything. The human, natural side and the formless side of awe and beauty. It's all It's all spiritual. Yes, just in a real practical way, the last 6 weeks through this rotator cuff recovery has been a journey of sometimes pretty difficult pain. And I have this thought that it's not okay to use pain medication, especially opioids, because opioids carry with them some risks. You know, you can, if you're using them at certain levels, you can become addicted to them. But because I was not willing to use opioids, and I can't sleep in bed yet, I can only sleep in a chair, I wasn't getting very much sleep. I was getting maybe 2 hours of sleep a night. And I don't know about you, but trying to keep up a very busy mentoring business, a speaking business, do the writing that I do the podcasts that I do, and manage on 2 hours of sleep a night is not very easy. And one night I was sitting in the chair trying to get to sleep, and my shoulder was just aching. It was probably on an 8 out of a 10 scale. And it was it was so funny because I was resisting taking the opioids that I knew would give me some pain relief so I could fall asleep. And it occurred to me that a friend of Sid's had contacted me during the pandemic, when Bill and I had an experience of being quite ill. We did not have COVID, we had something else. And for a month, both of us were sicker than dogs. And not that dogs are usually sick, I don't know where that expression comes from, but we were really sick. And this friend of Sid's reached out, and she told me a story about one of her children who had developed a disorder in childhood. It was a seizure disorder. And Sid had come to visit her and said to her, "Dearie, don't be afraid that your daughter needs to use seizure medication. The pill is God too, dearie." And that hit me. And this woman also told me that Sid told her, "Your daughter's going through a process. It's a human process. It's okay. She's okay. The process is going to be okay. If you can just trust, she'll know when it's time to come out of it." And sure enough, her daughter, who was very small, after a couple months of taking barbiturates, which were for the seizures, said to her, Mama, I'm ready to not take the medicines anymore. I don't need them." And much to the mother's surprise and the doctor's surprise, within a number of months, she came off the medicine and was fine. It was pretty miraculous. But as I sat there in the pain of my shoulder that night, I thought, it was like I could hear Sid's voice. You know, "Linda, the pills are God too, dearie." And so I took a half of 10 milligrams of oxycodone, and I took the medicine that I'd been given for muscle relaxing, and I finally slept. And as soon as I was sleeping, the pain levels started to come down, because my body was able to do what it does naturally in a rested state, which is function at optimal levels to speed the healing process. And so here I am 4 weeks later, and I'm still taking a little bit of pain medication, a little bit of muscle relaxing medication to help me sleep at night. But I am sleeping at night, and the healing is going faster. And I thought, oh, there it was again. I got tripped up into my intellect, thinking it knew better. And I got tripped up into thinking that the physical side of life is somehow different from the spiritual side of life. It's all the same thing. The body knows how to heal. It knows how to be in balance. It knows when it needs small amounts of medicine, and it knows when it doesn't. And the only time we get in trouble is when we override that knowing. So that was a beautiful lesson for me, to trust the spiritual. And as a result of my spiritual understanding, I just can't say anymore that I'm a religious person. I see that the forms that I was handed most often got in the way of my spiritual understanding rather than contributing to them. So I've largely let them go. But I don't see that that's required of the three principles understanding, or by the three principles understanding. In fact, one of the things that would happen when I started sharing the three principles as a psychologist was that I was working in the Bible Belt of Appalachia in the United States. That's a mountainous region, very Christian, very, very fundamentalist in terms of religion. And one of the beauties of finding the principles for me was that it was a non-religious spiritual understanding that I could share with religious people easily, irregardless of which faith tradition they came from. And one of the things that would happen as I shared it with the beautiful people of the Appalachian Mountains, who were most often Baptist and Methodist, they would come to me after a number of sessions and they would say, "Linda, thank you for sharing this understanding with me. It's helped me go back to church." And I would be like, "What?" And they would say things like, "I've been mad at my religion for a while," or "I've been mad at the minister for a while," or "I've been mad at the Bible for a while," or "I've been mad at God for a while. But this has helped me see that there are thoughts and there are forms that religion creates that sometimes do get in the way, or my thinking can get in the way about the minister, about what I think I hear in the Bible. But really, as long as I go back to love and I trust my inner knowing, and I trust the spiritual wisdom that's inside of me, that I can forgive the things in my religion that are a little bit astray and enjoy the love that I find in my faith community. And that was really beautiful. So yeah, leaning into curves, leaning into the curve of the principles. That threw me a big curve. In terms of my journey as a religious woman, leaning into those curves has yielded a life that is much freer, much quieter, much more intuitively guided, much more loving, in a really practical and also mystical kind of way. So I'd love to just hear your questions and have a conversation with you about anything that I've said or anything that you're thinking about from this point. So the floor is open.
Linda, that was beautiful, love.
Thank you.
Beautiful. You covered so much, and I just want to apologise for our screen because I'm sure it looked very, very busy. Lucia crapped herself. Rusty was going to crap himself. He was going to weigh on the floor. It was like everything all suddenly happened all at once. So forgive the chaos, but what you were speaking about was so beautiful, love. I love there's a few things that I don't want to take up too much time, but there's a few things that you just spoke about there. That there was something that you said where you said, I used to think there was like this spiritual side of life and then there was this human side of life. It's such a heart-opening thing when you realize, no, the two are one. And the very spiritual thing we're looking for is this very moment right here, right now. It's a magical event that ultimately nobody can explain. It's like it's beyond explanation. Is our very presence here having this conversation. And to look for the spiritual, we only have to look to the moment, in any moment, and there it is, creating. And I love that. But it was something you said also about you found the beauty, people finding the beauty in the Catholicism. We did some work in a charity in South Africa, and the main man didn't come so much, but when he did come, he sat down, he listened, he was in a wheelchair. And then at the end, he said something, he came up to us and said, what you're sharing's changed everything for me. And he gave us his backstory. It turned out he was a Catholic monk, wasn't he?
He was training to be a Catholic priest
Yeah, Catholic priest, but he was in a monastery, and
from the age of 11.
yeah, and he was playing football and he broke his back. He lived in the Democratic Republic of Congo and he broke his back.
Oh, wow.
In a wheelchair, and in that, I don't know what it's like in all Catholicism, but in his diocese, he wasn't allowed to share the word of God because he was now crippled, as he described himself. So he fell out with God. He fell out with God. He screw God if that's really what God thinks. And but I always remember when we interviewed him, he said, I'm at peace. He's on YouTube. This interview, he said, I'm at peace. I'm at peace now. And we said, can you explain a bit more about that peace? And he said, yes. He said, I've discovered that somehow the God that I feared, the God that was far, far away from me, watching my every move and judging me, the God that I had become so afraid of, somehow I am that God. And he said, and now I am at peace.
Yeah.
And it was such a beautiful thing. And on the same trip, we were working with deeply Orthodox religious Jewish people, and one of them came up to us and said, I can hear my Torah now. I can hear the Torah. And it's such a beautiful thing that there's always been these signposts to this inner wealth, but we've always mistaken the signposts for being something that is a secondary thing. It's something separate from the human. These are signposts to the spiritual, which is somewhere over there, which isn't in this moment. It's perhaps in the past, perhaps it was in the past, or perhaps it's in the future, perhaps one day we'll meet it, as opposed to what you were just describing about how, no, these signposts are always about the now. This is it. It's right here, right now. You want to find the spiritual, look to this moment, for it is life, that poem. Yeah, thank you, Linda. Love, that was beautiful.
Dave, that's so beautiful. My late husband, Jim, who was a Roman Catholic priest and functioned as a priest for 20 years, he came back to the States because he developed alcoholism. And his order, Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers, brought him back to dry out at a place called Guest House in Michigan, which is a treatment center for alcoholic and drug addicted priests. He once said to me, and this was not long before he died, so he had been out of the priesthood for almost 20 years. He said to me, Linda, I'm a religious man, and I take comfort in my Catholic religion, but I'm not spiritual. And I was so shocked. I said, Jim, you're the most spiritual man I know. How can you say you're not spiritual? And it was really interesting to me that we had this beautiful conversation about his understanding of the form of God absolutely was interfering with his ability to see the formless. That was the missing piece. Now, he died, he died before I found the principles, obviously, because I found the principles when I met my new husband, my current husband, Bill. But I often think, oh my gosh, Jim would have been so overjoyed. He would have found that last little link of peace that he was always looking for if he had seen beyond the form to the formless.
Yeah.
It would have been, I can just imagine his joy at that the veil would have opened for him. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see that the spiritual is about a formless energy. You know, Sydney Banks said to me the first time I met him, we were walking, and I think in one of our previous talks, I mentioned that he said to me that sometimes people can get so hooked on the metaphor of mind, thought, and consciousness that they miss that he's trying to point us toward love, the purity of love, the formless purity of love. But then we walked a little farther, and we were standing in front of a mural that had religious themes in it. And Sid didn't know very much about me, but I think he knew a lot about me. I mean, he sensed a lot about people. And he looked at the mural and he said, "That's so beautiful, Linda. It really is beautiful the way it depicts the things that are important in different forms of religion." But then he turned and he looked directly in my eyes and he said, "In the end, all forms will pass away, and what will be left is truth." Just hit me. And that has unfolded over my life since that time 20 years ago, that ultimately underneath what we're all looking for in religious forms, what my first husband was looking for was truth, the truth of love, the truth of what love is and all of its power.
Yep. Something that we've become very afraid of, in a bizarre way, in our societies.
Yeah.
Love has always been seen as a weakness,
Yes.
never as the ultimate strength. And as you were saying, leaning into curves, it's like when you lean into love, you are leaning into the force of the universe,
Yeah.
the creative force of the universe. Now, how can you not have the greatest power when you are embroiled in love? It's like, it's impossible. You are the most powerful thing because you've got the creative source, the creative energy, whatever anybody wants to call it, as the wind in your sails.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny old game that we've become so afraid of love.
And we trivialize it. You know, I think of love as a power. And, you know, like I often will say to my clients, I love my grandchildren. I love them more than life itself. And I live very close to two of them, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I spend a lot of time with them. And boy, they are forces. And their little brains are developing, and their intellectual understanding is developing. Their insight is developing. But there's a lot they don't see. And so when they run away from me in the front yard and they're heading toward the street, I don't say, "Oh, please, Luke, would you ever mind slowing down a little bit and don't go near the street? You know, honey, would you ever mind?" It's like, "Luke." And that's coming from love. You know, it's a power, it's a force. And it's not some namby-pamby, you know, insipid, passive, you know, romantic, frilly, willy-dilly kind of thing. It's a power. It's a knowing. It's a force. It's strength. It's courage. Yeah.
It's absolutely ruthless in its power. It's like, because that was the thing that when just before I listened to Sid, I had an experience of it. And when I listened to Sid, I had an experience of it. This love that just, I can't explain it, but it shattered my impression of everything. And it was the thing that I always said, it was the thing that created my birthday. I understood when Jesus said what the virgin birth meant. It was like the virgin birth was the rebirth within an individual, not from reproduction, but when you are reborn within yourself, to yourself, from yourself being that phenomenal love that exists at the heart. It exists at the heart of everybody. It exists at the heart of everything. And it's it's inexplicable and it's non-tangible, even when it's been experienced, you know you can't explain it, but it's more, I would say it's more real than this reality.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's ruthless. It will strip you of everything that isn't serving you in that moment.
Yeah.
And it will shake your life up, and it won't be comfortable. Doesn't necessarily have to be comfortable either. It's not beautiful. It comes with its consequences, but you'll never look back. And once you know, and you can always know that. And I think that I genuinely think the reason why everybody is on this screen is because they know deep within themselves. Some of you, I'm sure, have had this experience or similar, but you know deep within yourselves that's why you're here, because you know it exists.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've taken up too much time.
No, I want to tell you that, when you started talking, my body just started like, the word for it is I got a frisson. It's a charge that moved through my whole body. And I know that that happens when I'm in the presence of truth.
Yeah, that's the thing about love. It is truth.
Yeah.
It's the unifying field. That's why love brings everybody together. That's why love heals any psychological illness. It can heal the physical body, heal society, or heal the world. It's the only way. It's the only way.
Yeah.
It's the only way. But as a man, we were always kind of brought up to, no, loving's for softies. Love shows you are weak, not the ultimate strength.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Linda. Love.
Yeah, it was funny. As I was writing the book, I was writing about my childhood, and I started to write about how, as a little girl in catechism as a Catholic, I had to memorize something called the Baltimore Catechism, which was kind of a formulary for the Catholic religion. And it's a series of questions. And so it asks a question and then it provides an answer. And I thought, if I'm going to write about it in this book, I should go back and read it. I should go back and be clear because I only have vague memories of a few of the pieces of it. And what struck me was that it was quite beautiful in one regard. And that was that it talked, just as we were talking, about the power of love and about God as love, and God as this omniscient, all present, all knowing, all seeing, allness. The language that Sid used was actually in the Baltimore Catechism, which shocked me. Where the Baltimore Catechism went astray is that it cast the human side as evil, that the body was evil, that it was willful and not to be trusted, that human beings would always go to the negative and always go to what was wrong, that we were flawed. We were flawed by original sin. And I started to laugh because I remember hearing that when I was a kid, and yet knowing that was ridiculous. That the body is beautiful. We are beautiful. We are manifestations. We are spiritual manifestations of that love. We are love in motion. And the only time we're ever not love in motion is when we think ourselves away from it. But even then, Sid's invitation was just come back to love. There's a beautiful passage in an unpublished manuscript that I happen to have of his. It was an interview, and I'm not even sure who the interviewee was, but the interviewee says to Sid, do you ever get in a negative feeling? Does life always look beautiful to you? And Sid's answer was real simple. No. And yes, I do get in a negative feeling. But I know that all that's happened is that I've dropped in my level of understanding. And so I just let whatever thinking I was doing go, and I let my love, my wisdom, take me back up to a higher level of understanding. But then I don't go back and be negative about the fact that I got negative. That would be like punching my own self in the nose. I find that really funny. So it could be so humorous and pragmatic. Punching my own self in the nose, why would I do that? That I just go back and say, oh, that's all that's happened. I got a little negative. Take a deep breath, go back into the quiet, and automatically the buoyancy behind life, the love behind life lifts me into a new space.
Has anybody got any questions? Any observations? Has Linda's conversation rung true, is it? Please, anybody who's prepared to share or any questions, please come forward.
Hi Linda. Hey
Hi.
guys. Oh my god, I love this conversation. I feel quite moved. I don't really know why, but I just the force of the love, which you've both spoken of, and and right now I'm feeling it, and yet in the same page I feel emotion coming, because the force of the story, which keeps me in suffering rather than in love, also feels really, really strong. Like Dave said yesterday about, like, trying to go against the ocean, and how like when you're trying to, it just feels like such hard work to go, to stay in. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it just feels hard, but it feels powerful, but powerful both ways. Yes, love is really powerful, like I feel it right now, and yet the conditioning and the story also feels really powerful. So I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it feels like they're both strong.
Yeah, and maybe there's beauty in both. What flashed in my mind, and you're, I'm not sure what your name is. My screen just says Zoom user, and I don't want to call
Hi
you
Linda, it's Sarah. Hello, love.
It's a much nicer name. What I related to, Sarah, is after my late husband died, I was in deep grief. And I would have these moments where, and I didn't have the principles at that point. I had not encountered them yet, but I did, right? The principles had been operating perfectly in me from the time I was born. I just didn't have the language of them to really give words to what I experienced. But what I noticed was that I would have these moments. Like, I remember one, I was restacking a bin of wood on the back of the house in a big snowstorm had happened. So I was trudging through 2 feet of snow, and that was a job that Jim did. He was supposed to be there to do that job. And I was the one throwing those blankety blank logs, or moving them from the wood bin. The wood bin had to be away from the house because of copperhead snakes in the summertime. I had to bring them over to the house, throw them onto the porch, and then get them stacked in the wood bin because we heated with wood. And I was so pissed. I was screaming and shouting at Jim for dying, and I was upset. I was so upset, I ended up falling flat face in the snow just sobbing, creating icicles out of my nose and in the snow from the tears that were falling from my eyes. I was beside myself. But the funny thing was, after I sort of exhausted myself, I popped up and I thought, oh, and this just happened. I thought, oh, it's really beautiful outside. It's crisp and snowy and beautiful. And I turned and I saw the bird feeders that Jim had put up and saw these beautiful cardinals, red cardinals, feeding. And it just struck me that the red and the white and the brown of the trees were just phenomenally beautiful. And spontaneously I said, oh, Jim, I'm so grateful that you were here and that I had 18 years with you and that you showed me nature in a way that I had never seen nature before. And I was struck by that, Sarah, that in that I let that moment of grief just spend itself, but I didn't have to do anything to come back to love. That once it was spent, love and gratitude just welled up. And what I saw in that moment, and I saw this consciously, I didn't have the language of the principles to have explained it to anyone else, but I saw that underneath the grief, and I wouldn't have been able to tell you that it was fueled by my thinking at that time. I just saw that underneath the grief, love was. And I saw that I had a choice, that I saw that I could move my attention because I knew somehow that I had that ability to either focus on the grief or the love and the gratitude, one or the other. And there was no judgment about that. That's what was really interesting. I just saw that I could do that.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh. And gradually over time, so this was very gradual. It took about a year, but gradually I saw that I could make that switch from the grief to the gratitude and love more easily. And gradually it became apparent to me that I was serving the memory of the love I had with my husband much more deeply when I stayed in love and gratitude. And I moved through the grief much more quickly. And so it was a real gentle thing, it wasn't about resistance. It was just about surrendering to the grief when it came, but knowing that it was ephemeral, that it was moving, it was dynamic, and that underneath it, I would always come back home.
Yeah, you didn't have to do anything. There was nothing. You came up. There was nothing to do to bring the love. The love is, and we get in and out of the suffering, but we come back up to the love because that's what is.
It's that I don't know exactly whose metaphor this is. It may be Dickens, but it could be somebody else's. But it's that the metaphor I often think about is, the waves on the ocean can be really swirling and deep and big and crashing because there's a storm, in the atmosphere. But deep down in the ocean, it's still. It's just, the water is just still. And, I've experienced that, kind of getting underneath the water and feeling that stillness while up above the waves are crashing. It's a great metaphor. It reminds me a lot, and I often will think that, like these last weeks when I've been moving through pain and I've been up at night and thinking, holy Christmas, I can't stand this one more night, I am not an enlightened being, I can go to that place where I'm like ready to punch someone, but I'll think, no, wait a minute, this is pain, this is real, this is pain, this is inflammation. The inflammatory response in the body is necessary for healing after an injury. This is just part of the journey. This is part of the process. And I can go to that place where I am just quieter about it. just quieter, and just watching it and thinking, when I'm quieter, I'm collaborating with that healing journey. I'm not fighting it by creating even more information. And it's just a simple awareness, but it's a beautiful thing. It helps me ride the waves more gently.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. We've got 10 minutes left. Is there anybody else who wants to ask Dr. Linda Pettit a question? Any observations?
Hi. I want to say, Linda, how beautiful a message was and how it touched me in many parts of my life. And I was just telling Annette that by my bed, I've got a little, when I came to live here, I'm Annette's neighbor. The first thing I bought was a little 50p, what do you call it, tile that says love never fails.
Yeah.
So thank you, Linda. Your
Yeah.
message was really amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. Tell me your name.
Monica.
Monica. Hi, Monica. And hi, Annette.
Hi, Linda.
It's been a while. It's good to see you. Yeah. Love never fails. Yeah, it can't fail, can it? It's the source.
It is. I wished I knew the 3 principles years ago to help my uncle who suffered immensely,
Yeah.
died of cancer.
Yeah. You know, I was just reading a book because I have a podcast guest coming on my podcast. Her name is Gail Noble, and she's written 3 books on living with autism. Her brother was diagnosed with autism, and she has a 30-something-year-old son, Kyle, who has been diagnosed with autism, and he's nonverbal, so he doesn't speak. He really requires round-the-clock care, which she has been providing as his mother from the time he was born. And her latest book is called The Space of Love. And she writes in that book so beautifully about how many times, because her son can't speak, that he will be agitated and he will be in the grip of what she calls a cycle. He goes through these cycles of agitation and distress that they have no way of knowing what it's about. And how what she has really seen is that when she can come back to the space of love and just sit there in love and presence, that love never fails. As you said, that love will come through and guide her to know what to do. And sometimes what to do is just to sit there holding his hand. And sometimes what to do is just to sit there, to walk away and let him be. But sometimes love has also given her very specific guidance about things to discontinue or things to try to help him. And I was so moved when I was reading about that my goodness, if we all knew to trust that, how much more steady and secure we would feel, even in the face of unspeakable hardships. Yeah, so thank you for that. That's a reminder. Love never fails. Love can't fail.
It's so beautiful because my uncle suffered so much. There was so much suffering. It was all about not forgiving something that happened. the not forgiving himself or whatever happened. It's just the disease was, and I knew because I could see his chatter all the time in his head. And now I can see it. I can see it now with the knowledge I have. And especially after your talk, it opens my mind. And I was like just thinking about that. I've been thinking. And I thought, in my heart, I thought, I wished I could have helped. But yeah, thank you.
And maybe you did more than you know, Monique. Love comes through, and
Yeah,
sometimes in the simplest and the tiniest of ways. Yeah,
yeah.
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 My late husband, Jim, used to say, love, the greatest gift of love we can give is to listen. To listen to each other and to listen to what is behind life. And I wrote in his eulogy about him, another thing he said, more often than you know, when you listen, you are saving a life.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Yael. It's so good to see you.
So good to see you. Wow. I loved what you shared, and I think that just that last sentence that you said about your late husband Jim, listening can save a life. And I have a sister that I say I try to do the best I can to help in all kind of ways, and maybe there is I don't know what kind of way I can help. I don't know if I gave enough time to listen. But what if someone wants something else from me and not listening? What if that's not what they want from me? They don't want me to listen to them. They want something from me. And then it's like maybe somehow it comes in the way of knowing what to do, because then I can't really help. Maybe I'm asking a question of, that knowing, what that is that the same everywhere, in every place in life? I don't know if you have an answer, but that sentence that you said.
Well, I'm not 100% sure that I've got the question. So I was to take a stab at something though, and if I didn't, come back to me and ask again. That I think when we listen, my sense as a professional helper for over 40 years, is that when I'm listening, and I'm listening very quietly, I'm listening very deeply, two things will happen. And you pointed to this. Wisdom is coming through for everybody. Spiritual intelligence behind life is coming through in any given instant, because we're all one in every living being. So if I'm quiet and if I'm listening, two things are happening. Wisdom is coming through me, and wisdom is coming through the person I'm listening to.
Mm.
And if I am in a beautiful feeling of love and listening, I know that person is going to access wisdom, that they will quiet down, because listening is very quieting. And in that quiet, they will find some answer. But I also know that sometimes if the person I'm listening to is really busy, the wisdom might come through me. an idea might come through me about something that they could do. And so I wouldn't hesitate to say, you know, something has just popped into my mind. Do I have your permission to share it? And are you in a place where you would be willing to hear it? Now, if they say no, if I don't have permission, then I don't go there. But rarely do people not give me permission if I've got good rapport with them. I'll say, yeah, no. And then I might share and say, well, you know, this kind of idea kind of popped into my mind. What do you think about it? And it's really funny because sometimes they'll say, well, that's crazy, or I couldn't do that, or you must, you know, you can't give me advice or whatever, whatever, you know, because when the intellect hears wisdom, it gets jarred, the ego gets jarred. And so a reaction can happen. I mean, probably nobody on this call but me has ever had an in the moment reaction, right? Right? I see a lot of smiles, so I'm guessing that maybe you've had those too, where you hear something and then afterwards you're thinking, you know, that's not a half bad idea. So, or thought or knowing. So if I say something and a person gets disturbed by it, I don't get disturbed by their disturbance. I just know that if I've trusted my wisdom, my intuition, and I've gotten permission to share it, that probably it gave them something that was really important, but they have free will to reject it. And most likely they won't reject it, but they'll just need some time to let their ego calm down so they can hear and acknowledge it from their own wisdom. Does that help at all? Does that come anywhere close to answering your question?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I guess that just with the permission, you know, it's interesting because when I work with people, I ask them all the time if I have even permission to ask them a question. But when it's family, it's like I don't want to do that because I heard so much already, and I'm the devil, right? I'm the devil because I try to help, and in the past I didn't know I did things that they maybe harm people and harm myself. But when someone's in such pain and suffering, so that's what they remember when I hurt them and why they coming to talk to me, because and I guess that's also that. But when you said when they have a reaction, I stay quiet, and that's been hard for me to do.
Yeah.
Yael, is your name Yael?
Yes.
I had the same with my sisters. I've got 2 sisters in Italy. And I was like, I think the 3 principles has helped me a lot, because I was coming from a place where I wanted to tell them things or listen to them or listen. And then I thought, sometimes quietness is the best answer. And there were a situation, I can't, explain all the things, where my sister was upset with my mother a lot, and then I sent her just a message, very simple, that came from my heart, really from my heart. And all I said, it was that for me, it helped me to forgive her, to move on from my healing myself. I didn't talk about her. I didn't tell her what to do, but I said only that for myself, for my own healing, I had to forgive her. And maybe I had to forgive, maybe there was nothing to forgive, but I had to understand that. And there was no reply from my sister, but she changed a little bit. I could see it in her towards my mom in a positive way without me telling her. It's just like I found that little quietness, and when I was quieter is when the message got across. It's weird, but I was last week, I was doing something and I text her something about, because she's coming here over Christmas, after Christmas. And I text her something and she replied with her head really busy, busy, busy. And I didn't reply back. And I thought to myself, why people can't think with their heart? I just went, why can't she think with her heart instead with always with her mind? That was my joke into myself, a bit of my narrative. And you know what? 2 minutes later, she said, okay, Monica, I see if I can find them. It was something silly. And I thought, thank you, but don't worry if there is a problem, and then it came back to and it's just to find that little, even myself, I went, Jesus, why can't people just talk with their heart instead with their head? And it's so difficult, very difficult. It takes years of this kind of, this kind of meeting with these people. This I call it my tribe now, because it takes time to understand. It's learning. We're learning every day. We're learning, even if we're making mistakes, but then we are learning, and we get back, like Linda was saying, just the wisdom to know, okay, was Sid, I think she said, Sid said that, get back to your track or something. Sorry guys.
Oh, bless you, Monica. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's gone 5 o'clock UK time. And one of the things that came to me about was Ram Dass. He said, if you think you're enlightened, go and spend a weekend with your family. Oh,
That's the best.
yeah, I hope that sorts itself out. Look.
Yeah.
Hope that sorts itself out. But in the meantime, thank you everybody for being here today. We've had a wonderful time. Linda, thank you so much, love.
You're
You
welcome.
represent. You do. You're wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Bless
Thank you for
Jen.
listening.
Jen's been full on.
It's just the
Oh,
moment
I get it.
Woman.
we had Rusty there, and then she was trying to eat her shoe, like just throwing a shoe around her head and trying to eat her shoe. And I thought, never work with babies and babies and animals, but it was
Oh,
being done.
and
I'll
I'm
say
sitting-
this.
I'm sitting here thinking how beautiful that you show up as a family and just ride with it. I mean, gosh, where did that become just not something that we do and integrate into all parts of our lives? So, yeah.
Yeah,
It's great, isn't it?
we love it.
Have you got anything to say?
Anything to say?
Hi. Hi.
Ron,
Hi.
are your friends?
Hi.
Friends?
Oh,
Yeah,
she's so beautiful.
she's looking at a shoe.
You don't wear them, you just eat them.
Oh, bless you, Linda.
Oh,
Again, just so much thanks. Absolutely beautiful. I think I could have talked to you all night.
yeah.
It was so beautiful. Yeah, send our love to Bill.
I will. I absolutely will. And my love to you and to all of you
There
who
you
showed
go.
up here.
Is that your brother Rusty? Is that brother Rusty? She loves brother Rusty. She thinks he's hilarious.
Thanks for sending me that little video of her in her bouncy chair. I just got such a giggle out of that.
She loves it. She loves it. Oh, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
God bless, love. Thanks, Linda, love. We are back tomorrow at 10 a.m. So please come back 10 a.m. and we will be continuing, and with the title of Living with Simplicity. All right, so tomorrow, 10 a.m, last day. Loads of love, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.